I pulled into the driveway just past 10, gravel crunching under my tires like it didn't want me there either. The Delacqua house looked the same from the outside. White porch columns, red brick path, those annoyingly perfect rose bushes Vera always bragged about. The only thing that had changed was the way it made me feel. I hadn't even cut the ignition before that familiar pit formed in my stomach. I stepped out with Grandpa's gift tucked under my arm, a photo album I'd spent 3 weeks compiling, full of old pictures he'd taken with me before things got complicated. No one met me at the door. No one waved from the porch. I rang the bell once. A cousin, can't even remember which, opened it halfway, barely glancing up before turning and walking off. No hello, no good to see you. Just a cracked door and silence. Inside, the house buzzed with polite conversation, the clink of champagne flutes, and a playlist of oldies coming from somewhere near the kitchen. It smelled like pot roast and lemon furniture polish, Vera's favorite scent. I paused for a second, wiping my shoes at the mat like a guest, not a daughter. The seating chart near the entrance caught my eye. Printed, laminated, classic Vera. Names neatly listed in alphabetical order. And there I was. Leora Sterling, +1. +1? I hadn't even brought anyone. The line below mine. Astria Delacqua family. Of course. I swallowed hard and moved deeper into the living room. Everyone seemed to be performing some version of joy, like this was a Broadway revival of a happy family. Someone handed me a glass of cheap champagne. I nodded my thanks and tried to blend into the wallpaper. Vera floated through the room in a beige sheath dress, hugging, smiling, air-kissing people she hadn't seen in years. She finally spotted me and glided over. Leora, she said, lips pulling into that strained smile I'd come to associate with family events. You made it. And you look professional, as always. I forced a smile back. Thanks. Traffic was decent. Her eyes flicked to my shoes. Still living up north? Austin, actually. Oh, right. She nodded, like she'd forgotten, or didn't care. So, are you just here for the weekend? I opened my mouth but didn't answer fast enough. She was already turning away. Well, the cake's in the sunroom if you want a peek. I wandered over to the drinks table and stood there pretending to be interested in the wine labels. A middle-aged uncle came by, glanced at me, and said, So, you're still single, huh? No greeting. No context. Just that. I gave a tight laugh and changed the subject to the weather. About an hour in, Grandpa was wheeled out from his room. Everyone clapped like he'd returned from war. He looked diminished, neatly dressed, his hands folded over a plaid blanket, his face blank like he was waiting to be told how to feel. When he didn't smile or wave, someone whispered, He's not all there anymore. I didn't believe that. Not for a second. I tried to catch his eye, but he was staring straight ahead. The room dimmed a little, or maybe that was just my chest tightening. I watched as Vera raised her glass for a toast. Her voice trembled, but just enough to seem sincere. Today, we celebrate 95 years of wisdom, strength, and generosity, she said. Our father, our foundation. And as we look to the future, we honor the past by making sure he's cared for, in a place more suited to his needs. There was a beat of silence, then polite applause. I froze. Did she just say what I think she said? I looked around. No one blinked. No one objected. Not even a cough of protest. Everyone just nodded like it made perfect sense to evict Grandpa from his own home on his birthday. My breath caught, then slowed, like my body was trying to protect me from reacting. Vera stepped down, clinked glasses with 2 guests, and made her way back into the crowd. I stayed rooted to my spot near the buffet table, my champagne untouched. Later, while people milled around taking pictures and cutting cake, I noticed Grandpa looking at me, not vaguely, not blankly, but deliberately. His gaze tracked me across the room. Slowly, he shifted in his chair, moved one hand to his lap. I watched as he tapped his napkin, once, twice, then raised it slightly in my direction. No one else saw it. Just me. A signal? A warning? A request? I walked toward him, heart pounding. I reached Grandpa under the pecan tree just as a breeze caught the edge of his sweater. He didn't look up right away, but I saw his fingers still gripping the napkin. I crouched beside his chair, not saying anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. He slowly extended the napkin toward me like it weighed something far heavier than paper. I took it and glanced down. My breath caught before I could stop it. In trembling letters, faded but unmistakable, it read, "Help me, please." I folded it quickly, slipped it into my purse like I was tucking away a receipt, then looked at him. His eyes weren't blank this time. They were sharp, watching, measuring. I nodded, just barely. That was all he gave me, just that one chance to see it, and it was enough. Back inside, the hum of conversation felt louder, too bright. I passed through the hallway, trying not to draw attention. A child's voice broke through the noise just as I was heading toward the back lounge. "Are you the housekeeper?" I turned. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, held a half-melted ice cream cup and stared up at me like she was asking where the restroom was. "My mom said the real daughter lives in New York," she added with a shrug. I blinked, forced a smile. "No, sweetie, I'm family." "Oh." She looked vaguely confused, then ran off before I could add anything else. That one cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I sat on the edge of the old sofa in the lounge, holding my purse in my lap, and replayed that moment in my head again and again. The napkin, the child's voice, Vera's toast. It all spun together until I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a distant relationship. This was erasure. Not by accident, by design. When did it start? I tried to track it. The excuses, the postponed visits, the "oh, Grandpa's not up for a call" responses. The silence had crept in like fog, slow enough that I blamed myself. Maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe I'd been too busy, too far, too removed. But now I knew better. Grandpa hadn't been unavailable. He'd been hidden. I got up and walked toward the kitchen. Vera was at the island, slicing cake with robotic precision. Her movements were slow, practiced, rehearsed for an audience she assumed was always watching. I approached her carefully. "He seemed quiet today." She didn't look up. "He's just tired. It's been a long morning." "I meant more than that," I said. "He seemed different, disconnected." Vera wiped the knife clean. "Leora, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just concerned." She turned then, her smile flat and tight. "This is not the time for drama. Don't ruin his birthday." Ruin his birthday. Like that's what I'd do. Me, not the one who announced his removal during a toast. Not the one who ignored the tremble in his hands or the way he stared blankly through the party like a ghost at his own wake. "Of course," I said softly. "Wouldn't dream of it." I left the kitchen with my jaw clenched. Back in the guest room, I closed the door behind me and locked it. I pulled the napkin from my purse and laid it flat on the dresser. The ink had smeared slightly, probably from my fingers, but it was still readable. "Help me, please." I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. I took a picture of the note, zoomed in, stared at the shaky lettering. It wasn't just frailty, it was urgency. I started searching handwriting comparison tools online. I had no idea what I was looking for, but I needed to do something, anything, to make this real outside my head. "What are you trying to tell me, Grandpa?" I whispered. The room stayed quiet. But I didn't. The guest room I'd been assigned was on the far end of the hallway, past the family portraits that lined the wall like a curated timeline, births, weddings, graduations, everyone framed and smiling, fixed forever in better times. I paused at one photo in particular, me at age 7, sitting on Grandpa's shoulders, his baseball cap backwards on my head. It was one of the last pictures where I looked truly happy. I closed the door behind me and let out a slow breath. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting long stripes across the carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my phone, and stared at the photo I'd taken of the napkin. "Help me, please." The lettering had grown more haunting the longer I looked. His penmanship was shaky, yes, but not incoherent. This was a deliberate act. Grandpa had passed me a message, not just a scribble. It hit differently now. Not just as an isolated moment, but as a thread in a longer line of silence. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to look backward. Not the soft focus kind of nostalgia, but the kind that pinpoints where things went sideways. The birthdays I called about, but never got a reply. The holidays where Vera always said, "He's resting, let him be." The video calls that were promised but somehow never happened. It was easier to believe I'd drifted away than to admit I'd been pushed. The thought burned, and I pressed my palms to my knees like that could hold me together. My mind wandered to a memory I hadn't revisited in ages, me, around 16, in Grandpa's workshop. It smelled of cedar and motor oil, the kind of scent that seeps into your clothes and stays with you. I'd just bombed my calculus midterm and came over unannounced. Grandpa had handed me a root beer, turned off the radio and said, "Don't let one stumble make you forget you're meant to keep walking." That day, as I vented about school and my brother, Grandpa had leaned against the workbench and said, almost like a confession, "Your brother's not cruel, but he gets angry when he doesn't get what he wants, just like his father used to." He didn't name names, didn't need to. And I remembered how Astria once launched a wooden stool across that same room after learning Grandpa refused to co-sign a private loan for a business degree he didn't plan to finish. That stool had missed my head by a foot. It hadn't been tension, it had been a warning, tucked inside a family that excelled at appearances. I stood and opened the window, needing air. That's when I noticed Ms. Radley out on the back porch with a pitcher of iced tea. She saw me and waved me down. Reluctantly, I stepped out, grateful for an excuse to be anywhere else. She handed me a glass without asking. "You all right, sweetheart? You've had a look on your face like the party's happening underwater." I gave her a half smile. "It kind of is." She took a sip, then looked out toward the yard where a few distant cousins played cornhole. "They did the same thing to his wife, you know." My stomach tightened. "Who did?" She didn't look at me. "Vera and Astria. The day after the funeral, they held a house showing, said they were just exploring options." She turned her head. "You think this is about care and concern? Honey, this is what they do. When someone becomes inconvenient, they clean them out like expired milk." I nodded slowly, her words settling into the places I'd tried not to look too closely. It wasn't betrayal, it was habit. I returned to my room, pulled out a notepad, and began jotting down dates. Calls not answered, messages brushed aside, excuses made. I connected them to birthdays, hospital visits, financial shifts. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to start mapping a story they thought no one was watching. "They didn't just erase me," I murmured. "They've always erased anyone who made them look bad." I wasn't angry in the way I thought I'd be. It was colder, sharper, like standing in a blizzard, knowing the chill came from people who'd once warmed you. That night, after most guests had cleared out and the house had fallen into the quiet that follows polite chaos, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then pressed play. The voice was faint, trembling, older. "If you got this, don't tell them. You were always supposed to know the truth." I sat there in the dark, phone in hand, heart pounding. Whoever had sent it, they knew what was coming. And somehow, so did I. The voicemail played again, its static edges crackling under the weight of what it didn't say. I sat on the corner of the bed, eyes locked on the glowing screen. No caller ID, just a fragile voice whispering, "If you got this, don't tell them. You were always supposed to know the truth." I replayed it 5 times, trying to extract meaning from the pauses between words. The voice wasn't Grandpa's. It was older, feminine, maybe someone he'd trusted, someone who knew the stakes. My mind spun. Who else knew what they were hiding? Down the hall, I could hear the clatter of dishes, muffled laughter, and the low thrum of Vera's control restoring itself after the birthday spectacle. I needed answers, not silence. I stood, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the kitchen with the kind of resolve that makes people nervous before you've said a word. She was at the sink, back turned to me, sleeves rolled just enough to show off the watch I bought her for her 60th. "You know," I said, voice calm, "if Grandpa's really going to that facility, the least you could have done is mention it to me in advance." She didn't turn around, just kept scrubbing the same plate like she was waiting for it to crack under pressure. "You've been busy," she said lightly, "with your career, your travels. We didn't want to burden you." I walked further in. "You didn't want to burden me. Or you didn't want me to ask questions? That got her attention. She turned, drying her hands slowly. Her expression was a cocktail of exasperation and poise. Leora, let's not do this. No, let's, I said. Let's talk about how the only reason I found out Grandpa's leaving is because you said it with a flute of champagne in your hand like it was a toast. She smiled, thin and sharp. We're doing what's best for him. You've always assumed absence gives you the moral high ground. Absence? I almost laughed. You mean being excluded? I wasn't unavailable, Mom. I was uninvited. There was a pause. Her face faltered, just for a breath, then reset. If you'd wanted to be here, you would have been. The gaslight flickered between us, and I let it burn out. I walked past her toward the living room. Some cousins lingered near the cake, sipping coffee, trading benign gossip like we weren't a family on fire. I raised my voice. He built this house, I said clearly, without venom, just volume. Every beam, every wall, every nail. And now you're tossing him out like old furniture. The room went silent. Heads turned. Cups froze mid-sip. Vera moved quickly, stepping in with a polished grin. Let's not make a scene, she said. This isn't the time. It never is, right? I cut in. It's never the time to speak up. It's never the time to ask questions. It's never the time to care. Someone coughed. A chair scraped awkwardly. Nobody moved. The moment cracked in half. I turned to leave, but Astria caught me halfway down the hall. His hand reached out, not violently, but firm, like he had the right to stop me. You always wanted the drama, he said quietly, close to my ear. Don't cry when it becomes real. I yanked my arm back. Is that a threat? His mouth curled. You think this is your show now? I stepped back and leveled my gaze. No, but it's not yours either. I pushed past him and went straight to my room. My heart wasn't racing. It was focused. I grabbed my overnight bag from the closet and began folding clothes with a precision I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew where I wouldn't stay. Tomorrow, I would not wake up under this roof. I was up before the birds even started their noise. The house was still, tucked beneath a layer of silence that felt more like avoidance than peace. I folded each shirt slowly, deliberately, not because I had to, but because I needed each crease, each zip of the suitcase to say something. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't hiding. Every motion was a message. I was done pretending this place held anything sacred. Downstairs, I heard drawers opening in the kitchen, the soft thud of a refrigerator door closing, the clink of ceramic plates. I zipped the final pocket shut and stood by the mirror, straightening my blouse. My reflection didn't look angry. It looked steady. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't afraid of one either. At breakfast, the table was already set. Vera had placed herself at the head, coffee in hand, wearing that pale blue sweater she always wore when she wanted to look soft. Astria was scrolling through his phone, feigning indifference. Grandpa wasn't there yet, still being helped out of bed, I assumed. I took my seat without a word. The chair creaked under me like it knew what was coming. So, Vera began, buttering her toast with slow, elegant strokes. Any plans for the rest of the weekend? I looked her in the eye. Grandpa and I will be leaving by noon. I've already made arrangements. The sound of Astria's spoon hitting his plate was louder than it needed to be. He didn't look up. Vera's hands paused mid-spread. What? She said. Not angry, not surprised, just cold. I found a place nearby, I said evenly. Somewhere he'll be treated with dignity. I've packed his things. The silence wasn't heavy. It was sharp, and when it broke, it was with Vera's laugh, short, controlled. You're being impulsive, Leora. No, I said. I'm being intentional. She set her knife down. Do you really think you know better than the rest of us? You haven't been here for years. You made sure of that. Astria finally looked up. You're not taking him anywhere. I pushed my chair back, slowly, with both hands. Watch me. The rest of breakfast unraveled like dry thread. No one spoke much. Vera sipped her coffee. Astria left the table halfway through, muttering something about drama queens. I carried on like it was a normal morning, even as my stomach twisted itself into knots. While I waited for Grandpa to finish dressing, I found myself pacing the hallway and stopped outside the laundry room. The door was half shut. I pushed it open, needing a moment to breathe alone, but Vera was already in there, folding linens with robotic focus. She didn't turn. "You think you're saving him? You're destroying us." I leaned against the doorframe. Then maybe us was already broken. She looked at me for a long time, and for the first time, I saw something besides disdain in her eyes. I saw fear. Not of me, but of what I represented. The fracture, the evidence, the accountability. Her hand twitched as if she was about to reach for me, but it stayed in the air, useless. We said nothing else. I turned and left the room. By late morning, I had loaded the bags. Grandpa was ready, dressed in his old flannel and corduroy pants, the ones he always wore when he didn't care what people thought. As I helped him into the passenger seat, he looked at me, not confused, not afraid, just present. That was enough. I closed the car door gently, circled around, and slid behind the wheel. As I put the key in the ignition, I saw Astria standing on the porch, arms crossed. No words, no smirk, just watching. I didn't wave. I pulled away from that house like it was a closing chapter in a book I never wanted to reread. The motel was plain, but clean. Beige curtains, a working AC unit, 2 firm twin beds. I got Grandpa settled into one with a pillow behind his back and a cup of tea resting on the nightstand beside him. He nodded when I asked if he was comfortable, though he said little. His silence didn't feel vacant anymore. It felt protective. I sat across from him, laptop in front of me, pretending to check email. But my thoughts kept circling the same place, Vera's locked drawer. People don't lock drawers unless they're hiding something, I muttered under my breath. He didn't respond, but his eyes drifted to the television, and I could tell he wasn't really watching. I stood, opened my purse, and pulled out the napkin again. I laid it beside me like it was evidence at a crime scene, because it was. Outside, the last light of the day dimmed. The world was moving on like it always does. But I wasn't, not yet. As I walked out to the car to grab a charger, I spotted Grandpa's suitcase in the trunk. I hadn't even touched it since we left. I opened it out of habit more than curiosity. That's when I realized it was practically empty. 2 shirts, 1 toothbrush, a belt. It hadn't been packed by him. Someone had thrown together just enough to make it look like he was leaving on his own terms. But this wasn't a relocation. It was disposal. A quiet one. One they didn't expect anyone to question. I closed the trunk and leaned against the bumper. For a moment, I let the ache sink in. Not for me, but for him. The man who used to slip dollar bills into my backpack with notes that read, "For snacks," or "For bail," just in case. The man who taught me to change a tire, balance a checkbook, and never apologize for asking too many questions. They'd written him out of his own life, and they'd tried to do the same to me. I returned to the room, sat on the bed, and reached for the other item I hadn't touched. The gift box meant for Grandpa. I opened it. It wasn't my photo album. It was Vera's prayer book, the same one she gave him 2 birthdays ago, the one he'd quietly passed off to the Goodwill bin the week after. Inside was a card, with love from all of us. My name wasn't anywhere on it. My card, the one I had handwritten, the one I tucked under the ribbon, was gone. They didn't just rewrite history, I whispered. They ripped me out of it. But I wasn't done yet. In the rush to leave the house that morning, I'd slipped into Vera's office one last time, using the small brass key Seraphine had pressed into my hand just before she left. "If there's something in there," she had said, "you'll know it when you see it." The drawer opened easier than I expected. Inside, a folder marked MB Property. I didn't breathe. I opened it slowly, scanning the first page. It was a property transfer. Signed by Grandpa. To me, it had been notarized but never filed, dated 2 years ago, and buried in a locked drawer beneath old tax documents and outdated family newsletters. I'd taken photos of every page, left the originals exactly where I found them. Now, under the dim motel lamp, I zoomed in on the signatures. Every box checked. Every line filled. Legally binding. as valid today as it was the day he signed it. Turns out, I said aloud, the house they kicked us out of was never theirs to begin with. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I placed the napkin, the photos, and the gift box into a small canvas bag and zipped it shut. Then I walked out to the car, slid the documents into the glove box, and locked it. Back in the room, Grandpa had drifted off to sleep. His breath was slow, even. I stood at the desk, opened my laptop, and launched the browser. This wasn't about leaving anymore. I was preparing a return, one they'd never see coming. The motel lobby was quieter than I expected for early evening. A tired TV droned in the corner, some game show rerun blaring canned applause as I stood at the counter pretending to refill my coffee. My phone buzzed twice, a third time. The message was short. From a girl I went to high school with who somehow still showed up to every Delacqua baby shower and fundraiser. Your mom is telling people you kidnapped your grandfather. Thought you should know. I stared at it for a full minute. My breath caught, not from shock, but because I'd already been waiting for something like this. Vera never attacked directly. She whispered. She sewed. Then she stepped back and watched others do the damage. I sat down with the paper cup still in my hand, then pulled out my phone and called Samantha Baird, an attorney friend from Austin. We hadn't spoken in months. She answered on the second ring. Leora, what's wrong? I think I'm being accused of elder kidnapping, I said flatly. There was silence, then, Jesus. Okay, first of all, I haven't done anything illegal. You don't have to. You're a woman. You moved an elderly man without family consensus. That's already suspicious to the wrong ears. I didn't flinch. Then we'll make it legal. We already are. He's competent. He signed off on this, she sighed. Let me pull some strings. Send me everything you have. Documents, photos, videos. I'll get you a consult. I thanked her and hung up. They weren't just angry I left. They were afraid I'd talk. And I would. Later that night, I sat on the bed next to Grandpa, who was asleep again, his breathing soft, regular, and opened my inbox. The file folder marked birthday footage sat waiting. I hadn't opened it since I left the party, but I did now. Midway through one clip, taken by a guest I barely knew, I spotted it. Grandpa's voice, pre-recorded. A speech, probably something Seraphine had helped him tape for the occasion. I remembered hearing the first sentence, then nothing. In the video, Vera stood just off to the right. I saw the moment she nodded at the sound technician, gave a little flick of her wrist like brushing away lint. A beat later, the volume dropped. The guests looked confused, then distracted themselves with refilling drinks. She had cut his mic. That speech would have reminded everyone who built this place, I murmured. I rewound the clip, watched it again. They didn't just silence him with neglect, they muted him in real time. My stomach turned cold, but my mind was sharp. I pulled up the scanned documents, the property transfer, the notarized signature. I saved it all to a secure folder and emailed Samantha. Then I opened a new draft. Subject line, follow-up from Austin Women's Leadership Gala. Recipient, Clara Jameson, a local reporter who once interviewed me after a finance panel. The body was short. I have a family story that starts with a birthday and ends with a forged signature. I think you'll want to hear it. Before I could close my laptop, my burner phone lit up. Seraphine, I answered. Her voice was tight, hushed. They know. About the drawer. I felt a strange stillness creep over me. You need to move fast, she added. I didn't ask how she knew. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't playing defense anymore. It was war. We pulled up just before dusk, the light soft and gold across the porch columns. The Delacqua house looked unchanged from the outside, but something about it had hollowed out for me. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a mask, and tonight it was about to come off. My attorney, Samantha, stepped out of the car first, her leather case clutched in one hand. She wore her hair pulled back, and not once did she ask if I was sure. I'd already answered that. Vera had called it a family conversation. She wanted to clear the air. The air in that house had been poisoned for years, but sure, now was the time to purify it. Inside, they were waiting. Vera stood by the dining room table, arms folded, her smile ready but not sincere. Astria leaned against the wall behind her, thumb tapping his phone, trying too hard to look bored. Seraphine sat in the corner by the fireplace, hands folded, saying nothing but watching everything. Samantha placed her bag beside the table and took out a small digital recorder. "This isn't formal," Vera said quickly. Samantha didn't look up. "Then you shouldn't mind it being documented." I sat across from my mother, palms flat on the polished table. "We're here because I think you've lied. About Grandpa, about the house, and about what happened at that party." Vera's voice was syrup. "Leora, I've done nothing but care for this family. You've always had a flair for theatrics." I pulled out my phone and hit play. It was a voicemail. A voice. Old, raspy, and clear. "Melis was already in assisted care weeks before this party. I visited him. I talked to him. The man at that birthday wasn't him." The room shifted. Seraphine flinched. Astria's phone froze mid-scroll. Vera's face tightened. I stared at my brother. "Want to explain?" Astria's lips parted, closed, then he muttered under his breath, "That's not what we told him to say." The silence that followed was volcanic. Vera broke first. "You're twisting things." I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the table. She recognized it immediately. "You went through my private things?" Her voice cracked at the edges. "You buried Grandpa alive," I replied evenly. I dug up the truth. I flipped the folder open, exposing the property transfer, notarized, signed. Her name wasn't anywhere on it. Mine was. Grandpa's was dated, legal. "You stole from him. You stole from me. And you thought locking it in a drawer would erase it." Astria pushed off the wall. "You're not walking in here and rewriting the story. You already tried that," I shot back. "You just didn't count on anyone reading the original." Seraphine finally spoke. "She's not wrong." Everyone turned. Seraphine stood, voice soft but sure. "You both knew what you were doing, the rest of us just didn't want to see it." Vera looked ready to spit. "I have spent the last 10 years keeping this family together." "No," I cut her off. "You've spent the last 10 years rewriting it and erasing anyone who didn't fit your version." Her jaw trembled, but she didn't speak. "Where's Grandpa now?" I asked, loud enough for every soul in that house to hear. No one answered. I looked at them, my mother, my brother, the ruins of a family portrait that no longer hung over the mantel. "You erased him," I said, "so you could inherit him." And then I stood. Samantha followed, picking up the documents. "We'll be filing first thing Monday." As I reached the door, I paused, just long enough to say what needed to be said. "Your house, your money, all of it was his, and now it's mine. I won't beg for it." I opened the door, felt the night air. "I'll take it." The motel room was quiet when I opened my eyes, not peaceful, just suspended. The kind of quiet that only happens after something has ruptured. Light leaked through the heavy curtains in strips, and my phone buzzed on the nightstand like it had something urgent to say. 16 missed calls, 2 from unknown numbers. A text from Seraphine. "They're falling apart. Stay low today." I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else. Not me. Not the girl who used to sit at that polished kitchen table while Vera poured orange juice and told her to keep things light for company. That girl had been left behind somewhere between the family meeting and the moment Samantha filed the papers. I didn't move for a few minutes. Let the silence hold me. And then I checked my email. The clip was there, attached by someone anonymous. A different angle from the birthday party, a different guest. In it, Astria's arm swung with just enough force to be unmistakable. The audio crackled, but you could still hear it, the slap. Me hitting the wall behind the buffet, the gasp from someone nearby, the stillness that followed, louder than any scream. A tweet had already gone viral. He decked his sister at Grandpa's 95th, that's elder abuse by proxy. Comments poured in like wildfire. Why didn't anyone step in? You could see her mom look away. This family's built on silence. I protect, Grandpa Nashgard power exposed. By mid-morning, 3 major donors had pulled from Vera's charity foundation. A local news affiliate had picked up the story. And my name, for once, wasn't the one being whispered with a raised eyebrow. I watched the footage again. Slower this time. There I was, hands raised, voice calm. And there he was, furious, entitled, violent. But the part that hit hardest wasn't the strike. It was Vera. She was in frame. She watched it happen, looked straight at a guest, and smiled. It wasn't instinct. It was intent. She saw me fall. And she didn't flinch, I murmured. That's when I knew it was never about anger. It was about elimination. I heard Grandpa stir beside me. He'd been resting most of the morning, eyes closed, but never really asleep. He turned his head toward the television. The clip was playing on loop now. He didn't react at first, just watched. Then, without turning, he said, "She always wanted you quiet, but you were never meant to be quiet, Leora." I swallowed against the knot in my throat. She didn't just want quiet, she wanted obedience. He let out a sound, half exhale, half laugh. Obedience is for pets. You were always fire. The air between us settled. Not peace exactly, but something close to mutual understanding. Before I could speak again, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Sterling?" a woman said, her tone professional. "I'm with the county records office. I think you'll want to see what your grandfather tried to file 3 years ago." I sat up straighter. "What is it?" "There's a file under his name, a trust document. It was flagged incomplete at the time, but, well, something about it doesn't add up. You should come in." As the call ended, I looked at Grandpa. He hadn't moved, but I could feel it. He knew. Whatever I thought I knew. That call changed the game. The records office in Bastrop was the kind of place no one ever noticed unless they had to. Fluorescent lights. Beige walls. A clock that ticked too loud. The clerk who greeted me looked like she'd been sitting behind that desk since Reagan was president. But her eyes were kind, and her voice low. "I wasn't supposed to call you," she said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. But something about it didn't sit right. I opened it slowly, fingers already trembling. Inside, a scanned trust document. Grandpa's name, my name, dated 3 years ago. The signature box was filled. So was the notarization stamp. But across the bottom margin, stamped in red, incomplete. Signature confirmation required. "They didn't lose the paperwork," I said out loud. "They made sure it never counted." The clerk didn't blink. "That happens more often than you'd think, especially when the family has motivations." Outside, I sat in the car for a while, envelope still in hand. The sun was brutal against the windshield, but I didn't turn on the engine. I needed the heat, the discomfort. It helped me focus. I remembered the cake box. 2 weeks earlier, before all hell broke loose, Grandpa had slipped a folded napkin under the birthday cake box. I thought it was nothing, a habit from years of jotting down jokes and grocery lists. But now I knew better. Back at the motel, I found the empty cake box under the bed, tucked away like a discarded afterthought. I pulled it open and reached beneath the cardboard insert. The message was still there, scrawled in the familiar crooked letters. "Don't let them erase me, or you." He had known. He had always known. I held the napkin like it was sacred scripture. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the day turned the color of tired pennies, there was a knock at the door. Seraphine stood there, holding a worn envelope with one corner missing and a post-it note barely clinging to the edge. "I wasn't sure when to bring this," she said, eyes darting behind her. "But it's time." She handed it to me, then stepped back like it was something burning. Inside was the original contract, Grandpa's signature still crisp, still valid, notarized in blue ink. The post-it said, "Make sure she sees this, when it's safe." I sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed for the first time in what felt like weeks. The weight of doubt that had followed me since the first toast at that cursed birthday party lifted, one slow inch at a time. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was justice. The next morning, Samantha and I sat across from a probate officer in her downtown Austin office. She wore glasses low on her nose and spoke in clipped, efficient sentences. "Emergency intervention granted," she said after reviewing the documents. "You'll need to submit a statement and we'll file today." "No press release," I said. "Not yet." "Let the paperwork speak first." Samantha nodded. "They'll hear it loud and clear." I looked at her. "I'm not destroying a family, Sam. I'm correcting the lie they've been living in for years." That night, back in the motel, I opened my inbox. There it was, an official email from the probate court, Vera's name, Astria's, listed as interested parties, status, notified. I didn't forward it, didn't call, didn't gloat. I just leaned back, exhaled, and watched as the quiet I'd carried for so long finally settled into their side of the story. For the first time, they were the ones backed into silence. 2 weeks had passed since the court notice went out. I stood alone in what was now, legally and quietly, mine. The house didn't feel victorious. It felt hollow, empty in a way that wasn't about furniture, but about echoes. The movers had finished that morning. Everything Vera and Astria had left behind was gone, boxed and loaded like it had never belonged here in the first place, except for Grandpa's reading chair. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting my hand trail across the faded molding. No noise, no footsteps, no Vera's heels clicking down the tile, or Astria's voice echoing from the back porch. Just stillness. This wasn't victory. This was clarity. I walked into Grandpa's old reading room, the one with the tall windows and the faint smell of cedar that clung to the walls, no matter how much polish Vera used. The chair was still where it always had been, angled toward the sun, close enough to reach for a book without standing up. I lowered myself into it gently, like sitting in a memory. The cushion gave beneath me, soft and familiar. When I leaned back, something shifted under my hip. I reached between the cushion and the armrest and pulled out an old photograph. It was faded at the edges. Me, maybe 5 years old, standing next to Grandpa at his workbench. We were covered in sawdust, both grinning like we'd just invented joy. "This house wasn't made of walls," I said aloud, voice steady. "It was made of weekends and sawdust and stories." The doorbell rang mid-afternoon. I opened it to find Seraphine standing there with a small bag in one hand and a fresh scar across the truth in her eyes. She stepped in like she'd never left, nodding once. "They're gone," she said. "I know." She sat on the edge of the couch, exhaling as if she'd been holding something in for years. "Vera hasn't spoken to anyone. She canceled all her board meetings. Astria stepped down last week. No statement." Just silence. "No apology," I said. "No contact either." I leaned against the archway and crossed my arms. It's easier to lose than to admit you tried to erase someone and failed. We didn't speak for a while after that. She stayed for tea, then left without fanfare. No ceremony. Just the way people leave when there's nothing left to pretend about. Later that night, I walked the hallway that used to suffocate me. But now, with every step, it felt less like a corridor of shame and more like a reclamation. I stopped where the front door used to feel like a threshold I was never meant to cross. I thought about the day I left, walking out with Grandpa beside me, heads turning, judgment trailing us like perfume. Now, I walked back through that same space, but this time, there was no one to watch, no eyes, no weight, no performance. I was no longer the guest. I wasn't the enemy either. I was simply me. In the kitchen, I opened a drawer looking for tea bags and found an envelope instead. Cream-colored. No return address. My name written in handwriting I knew too well. I peeled the flap open with deliberate fingers. Inside was a letter. "You always were good at taking what you didn't earn." I stopped reading after that line. I didn't feel rage or grief, just a kind of tired knowing that some people would rather rewrite the truth than face the version of you they couldn't control. And I wasn't going to burn the letter. No. I would read every word and decide exactly what it deserved. The air inside the probate court office was cool, almost clinical. I sat across from the judge at the long, polished oak table, my attorney to my left, the court clerk tapping on a laptop at the far end. I could feel the tension before a single word was spoken because Vera and Astria were seated across from me. Neither of them spoke, neither looked my way. The judge's voice was steady, unhurried. The trust transfer submitted by Mr. Malus Beaumont in 2020 is hereby recognized as valid. The estate, inclusive of the residence, financial accounts, and all unencumbered property, will be fully transferred to Ms. Leora Sterling. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Vera's jaw flexed, just slightly. Astria blinked twice and shifted in his chair like the cushion had betrayed him. The weight of the truth didn't scream. It landed in quiet blows, the kind that leave bruises on the inside. We stepped out into the hallway after. Samantha turned to me, lips tugging at the edges. "You did it." "No," I said. "He did." That evening, back in Grandpa's house, now mine, I turned on the TV for background noise. The local station was airing a pre-recorded interview Vera had given the day before. She sat in front of a bookshelf, eyes soft, voice measured. She's always been emotionally volatile, unstable. It's been difficult as a mother to watch her spiral. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Then they cut to a live segment. A woman from the birthday party, Janine Calloway, stood outside the community center. "That's a lie," she said directly into the camera. I saw the hit. I saw the look on Vera's face when it happened. She turned away like it was rehearsed. The anchor's tone turned. "Several donors have withdrawn support from the Delacqua Foundation following the allegations of forgery and elder mistreatment. Mr. Astria Delacqua is currently under review by the State Board." I turned off the TV. I didn't cheer. I didn't need to. The next morning, I signed the final documents at the law office. The pen I used had belonged to Grandpa, one of those metal ones with a weight to it, engraved with his initials. The same pen he used to write checks for my textbooks when no one else even asked what I was studying. They kept calling it inheritance, I said to Samantha as I slid the final paper across the desk. But what I claimed back was never theirs. Later that day, I returned to the house alone. It was just past dusk. The wind was soft, the light slanted and gold. I stood by the fireplace and held the letter Vera had left, the one she thought would cut deeper than the blade of her silence. I didn't burn it out of rage. I burned it because it deserved nothing more. The flame curled around the words, swallowed them whole. I didn't speak. There were no final monologues. Just the soft crackle of paper, and then it was gone. Grandpa's chair still sat by the window, untouched, angled toward the light. The yard outside stretched quiet and wide. It looked nothing like a battlefield now, just land, ours. As the last of the sun dropped below the tree line, I walked barefoot across the back porch. There was no music, no applause, just the creak of old wood, the breath of wind, and the distant hum of crickets claiming the silence as their own. I didn't win a war. I just stepped out of one. Back inside, I sat on the couch and opened the old voicemail Grandpa had left years ago. His voice, aged, warm, filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it means you didn't give up. I knew you wouldn't." I closed my eyes and let it sit with me. And now, I'm ready to tell other stories, the ones no one dared to say aloud.